Hi, welcome. I'm Justin Hansen. Today, I have the wonderful fortune of sitting down with Greg Crabb, the former CISO from the United States Postal Service, semi-recently retired, and now heading up a cybersecurity advisory service and becoming one of the foremost experts on zero trust. Thank you for the time sitting down with me today.
Thank you so much. Organizations have a lot of opportunities for improvement when it comes to machine identity management. And I think that's something that we can spend a little bit of time talking about today.
Indeed. So, just jumping into this, tell me a little bit about how you first encountered machine identity management.
I came across the need for machine identity management long before it was ever called machine identity management. Back in the late 90s, I had the good fortune of working the early days of FIPS 140 and the early hardware crypto modules that were being rolled out as a result of that NIST publication. And really at that time, playing with the art and science of how cryptography is bound to devices. And obviously this whole industry of machine identity management has evolved over the last couple of decades. And I think that there's still a lot organizations need to do in order to be able to improve in machine identity management.
Can you share with our listeners your take on what those challenges were, even during that implementation?
Absolutely. From a machine identity strategy and management practice, I think that cybersecurity organizations need to prioritize secure communications in their organizations. And sometimes it's just assumed, but you can't assume anything. And really prioritizing how public key cryptography is the foundation of trust in your organization is really the starting point. And then you need to make those tough decisions about how that PKI is managed. Do you centralize it? Do you run a decentralized management scheme from a PKI perspective? And then that evolves into all of those technology discussions about how do you bind that PKI infrastructure to all of the hardware devices and even when you think about cloud workloads, the software infrastructure in your organization, right? And so that evolves into all the process discipline that you need to apply. And admittedly, every cybersecurity program is dealing with the challenges of experience and the competition of resources. So much of how PKI is implemented in an organization depends on that partnership with the technology providers, the CIO, the CTO in the organization, and competing priorities really are something that need to be worked through. The other day, I learned about the Accelerator Program that you've rolled out at Venafi, and really, I think can really support organizations. So what are the objectives of this new Accelerator Program for Venafi in the area here of machine identity management?
Within an organization, whenever they're rolling out machine identity management as a whole, right? Whether that's certificates and PKI as we might traditionally think about it, or SSH keys and now more and more so SSH certificates, but code set, like all of the things that go into machine identity management, all of the things that go into this now have generated such a bigger set of complexity that it's harder than ever for any one person, any one team to be able to successfully navigate that complexity. We found that a lot of organizations really needed just that next level of strategic guidance and also help, the ability to roll up our sleeves and get in and help to execute in a tactical way. Out of that, we created this Accelerator Program. It's like a subscription to a panel of experts, other solutions and resources that we make available to really just help to accelerate organizations' ability to navigate the complexity and really have a successful machine identity management program.
I think organizations would really benefit from having that expertise at their avail to guide them in the process of the competing priorities, understand,
Right.
all that they need to do.
I think a lot of times the biggest challenge is, besides knowing how to do something, it's like what should be done now? What's important, right? Everything's important, and everything seems urgent sometimes, but really what's the best practice? How do we really lay out a long-term strategy for getting this under control? And at the end of the day, it's all about enabling the business to be successful at the things that they need to be successful at. So, kind of transitioning from that just a little bit, maybe share with me, explain a little bit of some of the top lessons that you've learned, having gone through, all of your background and experience as well. Are there wish list items that you would like to have seen accomplished? If you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?
Big question, I'll break it down in two areas. Like top lessons, automating the certificate lifecycle process in an organization is critical. Outside of automation, there are so many opportunities for mistakes, human error, integrations not being considered in lifecycle improvement process. So that's a big top lesson that I've got no hair as a result of some meetings that occurred along the way. And then metrics. You've got to have metrics that provide transparency from the CIO down to the frontline system administrators and the cybersecurity personnel that are running your certificate authority. Being able to keep security protocols up to date. You talked about SSH and TLS, and all those things are really some of those top practices that really need to be implemented. And I think that there are many things that organizations to do. So kind of transition to where I see a lot of companies from a wish list perspective, looking at code signing, improving their cloud architectural design so that those modern architectures of Kubernetes and certificate management are properly maintained. That's really where I see a lot of opportunity for organizations to benefit. I'd love to hear you talk about some of the benefits that the Accelerator Program bring to organizations.
The Accelerator is really set up around a few key benefits. One is really focusing on how do we ensure that organizations accomplish the overall desired outcomes. Things like you mentioned automation, right? Like that's something that's fundamental to a lot of organizations. Whether it's for efficiency or for security, right? Automation is really kind of that bedrock thing. So we really focus a lot on delivering not just tools and not just solutions for automation, but best practices and patterns. Like how do we decide what to tackle first? So automating for efficiency is a big one. The second big one is just stopping outages. A lot of organizations, despite all of our efforts over the last number of years, we're still seeing far too many, like one is too many outages because of certificates expiring. Other things like allowing them to modernize. We're seeing a huge push for modernizations from cloud native and moving just how we develop and deploy applications in those spaces. And then ultimately ensuring that we're meeting compliance and audit guidelines. So those are kind of the tenets that we put around what we want to ultimately see, how we measure success, the goals that we're trying to work towards. I mentioned earlier that panel of experts, right? In order to accomplish this, you really need a whole set of skills. And it's rare. I've tried, and I still look. Like if you can find the kind of project management, strategic guidance, and developer and PKI, right? If you can find that expertise in one person, I want to talk to them. The reality of it is in order to address these things, we need to be able to bring a panel of experts. So in the Accelerator program, one of the main things that we're doing is assigning a panel that is really heavily engaged with our customers to address those goals that I mentioned before. There's a number of other benefits besides just the people component. And the one that I really want to take a minute just to highlight is, I mentioned that developer. Software is really taking over, right? I've heard it said, software is eating the world. Everything is software these days. And it really is true. And when we start talking about solving any sort of problem, and especially a machine identity problem, we're talking about connectivity and connecting and integrating the ability to automate between many different kinds of systems and do things at greater speed and get those metrics out. And a lot of times that requires some sort of development exercise, whether it's a simple script to automate an action, or whether it's a deeper integration with something that requires a machine identity. And we've got to figure out how to get that done. One of the advantages that the Accelerator program brings is the ability for that team, because we're going to be engaged for a long period of time. It puts us in a position where we can really quickly create and be around to support those things in a production environment, right? It's one thing to write a script and throw it out there, but it's another thing to make sure that we're putting something into a production environment that can be supported for the long term. So really excited about a couple of those main benefits. There are others as well, but I'm super excited to try to get to some of these other questions that I had queued up for you. I talked about the strategic guidance part, and I think that's a huge part of the Accelerator program, being able to provide that strategic guidance. Now you're retired, you're kind of in a similar role, right? You're out there providing strategic guidance to a whole bunch of customers. Can you help me understand some of the challenges that your clients are facing in this space?
Thank you very much, Justin. I can really relate to all of the benefits that you're talking about, because I see those issues in a number of different organizations. I want to key on two topics that are really important from my perspective as it relates to this topic and how I see it in organizations. I'm aware of a number of compromises of machine identity in organizations. I can't go over the details. However, if you don't have a good cycle of how machine identity is managed from an enrollment to use and renewal perspective for your certificate lifecycle, and an adversary can get their device onto a network and get enrolled into your certificate authority, that is a huge risk for a company. Cybersecurity leaders need to really take a step back and understand that whole life cycle and how that, if attacked, could leave your organization vulnerable. And I've seen it too many times, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about supporting machine identity management. The second thing is the financial aspects of machine identity management in your organization. You talked about outages. Outages have financial impact on a business. When you can't do your core business because you've got certificates that have expired, that is a bad day, and accountability needs to be made. An accounting of how much business was lost because the information security practice and the IT organization didn't do their due diligence to properly manage that whole life cycle. For it at the end game, we're really interested in making sure security is properly applied in those applications, but those business impacts need to be measured. One of the things that really astonished me about the errors, manual certificate renewal processes are extremely costly because you're dealing with a system administrator's time, a developer's time. When that process is automated, you can significantly reduce those labor costs in your organization. Right. And if you've got hundreds of applications and God only knows how many devices that you're dealing with from a network infrastructure perspective, you can pull out a lot of cost when you automate that certificate cycle. So those are two things that I've seen in organizations as I've kind of provided advisory services. That to me is really where a lot of benefit can come to pass.
Do you ever talk to your clients about, there's the other reason to automate is really about security. Do they also see automation as a way to improve security? Just as a quick example, if I'm doing things manually, I'm probably like carting around key material, maybe on a thumb drive, maybe in an email, even worse, right? I've seen some things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes to being very diligent about that certificate lifecycle management process in your organization, and recognizing that those manual processes are inefficiency in that lifecycle management process and expose vulnerabilities from an attacker perspective. So yes, automation can significantly help that process. The whole purpose of having your certificate management program is to assure security in that in your infrastructure, that connection to your root of trust, your PKI infrastructure. If you can't rely on that connection between the PKI and your devices, it's all over. And like I said, I've seen it too often where organizations aren't managing that in a secure manner, and unfortunately bear the brunt of a compromise.
Right. I think that's where there's a lot of things that we can do to improve that security and make sure that we've got processes and policies and those kinds of things defined. And really that's what comes back up to that strategic guidance, right? It's one thing to come in and say, hey, do it better, but it's really important to get that holistic picture and provide that strategic guidance. And I think that's really what we're trying to tap into with the Accelerator program as well, is making sure that we're aligned with the organization strategically. And one of the ways that we've done that is through ensuring that at least annually we're sitting down at the executive levels and saying, hey, here's the strategy that we're moving forward. This is the best practice in the industry. Like these are the things that are required to be done as a result of that, and then reevaluating that on a continuous basis and making sure that and even more frequently, right, that progress on that's being filtered back up to those executive sponsors who are ultimately responsible, not just for making sure that we're doing things in the most efficient way. That's obviously important too, but a lot of times their necks are on the line too for ensuring security. So wanting to make sure we get that information back up to them.
Still have questions? Turn to Venafi, the machine identity experts. Check out our channel or visit venafi.com to learn about all things encryption, certificate management, and more.